Thank you, Femi, and good morning, everyone. Actually, my task is made easier by those who have spoken before me, starting with Gunhill's wonderful vision and strong message to us all, and the SDGs and planetary boundaries presentation, the wedding cake. When the question is posed, why is there a need for change? I tend to begin by thinking about my 5 grandchildren, who will be in their 40s in 2050. And what kind of world will they have, and what kind of opportunity? And then I recognize that I have to step back a little because they're likely to be among the lucky ones. I listened with a lot of concern and would like to echo that concern to His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Samoa. I was in Samoa in 2014 at a summit of the small island developing states, and I saw the anxiety and concern. More recently, at the Skoll International Forum, I spoke with Selina Lim, a young activist from the Marshall Islands. She told a story about her homeland. At the height of the Cold War, the Marshall Islands were used as a test site for nuclear weapons by the United States. In order to contain the radioactive damage that this caused, an enormous dome was built in 1979. Outside the dome, a sign was placed which read, "Do not come back for 25,000 years." A glib reference to the half-life of the plutonium radiation that sealed away under this dome. That sign was recently washed away by the rising ocean tides. And I think this is a remarkable visualization of the change that we are now experiencing, a change in the threats we face as a global community. As you've heard, the world population is projected to grow to around 9 billion by 2050. Without substantial change in the way we do business, both economically and politically, we are condemning a substantial number of these people to poverty, to increased risks of disaster, of slow onset struggles like drought, deforestation, and an ecosystem vastly different to our own. And this isn't new information. In 1992, governments recognized a need for change when they created the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Its first principle reads that, and I quote, "The parties should protect the climate system for the benefit of present and future generations of humankind on the basis of equity." Last December, countries came together to create the Paris Agreement, which, as its chief aim, looks to keep world temperatures well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. It pledges to do this in the context of sustainable development. I will never forget the emotion in Paris when the gavel came down on that agreement. There was such an outpouring of tears, of hugs, of a sense that for once the most vulnerable had been listened to, and they knew it. This was a fair agreement. It's not a strong agreement, unfortunately, but it's a fair agreement, and that matters a great deal. Protecting the climate system is often seen as being in conflict with the goals of development. And we live at a time when over 800 million people live on less than $1.90 a day. Extraordinary efforts are going to be required over the coming decades to lift these people out of poverty. The Sustainable Development Goals agreed last year give us a roadmap to achieve this goal, including under Goal 13, to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. So we do need to change. We need a change that shifts us from the efforts of concluding these treaties and agreements into concrete action that implements and achieves the goals set out within them. Some of the answers can be found in the Paris Agreement itself. Paris includes important commitments on human rights and gender equality, a specific acknowledgement of the importance of climate justice, a framework for monitoring national progress, and a commitment from rich countries to provide financing for climate action in poor countries. The trouble is, none of it is being done sufficiently actively and fast enough. But these commitments do send a signal to citizens and businesses that the world must shift away from the 5 main sources of greenhouse gas emissions: dirty energy, dirty transportation, unsustainable agriculture, deforestation, and bad waste management. Recent research makes the case that well-designed policies can reduce emissions, increase resilience, and eradicate poverty simultaneously. However, to be effective, these policies need to be adequately resourced, with international support critical for poorer countries. In addition, climate policies need to be people-centred and respect human rights in order to avoid unintended consequences. We've already had unintended consequences. For example, using corn for biofuel that drove up food prices. And there are many other examples. And there are examples now of human rights violations by clean energy companies in a rush to do big projects, not consulting at grassroots level, not respecting land rights, not respecting indigenous people's rights. So we have unintended consequences if we don't respect human rights. I like the way that the EAT initiative gathers in an interdisciplinary scientific knowledge platform on the interconnections between food, health, and environmental sustainability to spur innovation and develop evidence-based policies and strategies to induce behavioural change. And that's what we've been hearing about, the need to change all our behaviour. And Femi is right that I do want to try and break down silos. So here's one suggestion. As I've looked at and listened to the way in which EAT is developing, I'm reminded of the spirit behind the Scale Up Nutrition, SUN community. I happen to be on the lead group of SUN, which now includes 58 countries, as well as academics and civil society members in its network. And I would hope that EAT and SUN can link more effectively together to build a broad-based movement for sustainable development. Because frankly, that's what we need. We need a movement, a broad movement. The principles of climate justice could guide this broad movement. Climate justice is something that obviously I feel very strongly about. My foundation is called the Foundation on Climate Justice, and it links human rights and development to achieve a human-centred approach, safeguarding the rights of the most vulnerable people and sharing the burdens and benefits of climate change and its impacts equitably and fairly. Climate justice is informed by science, responds to science, and acknowledges the need for equitable stewardship of the world's resources. Climate justice isn't just about supporting those who are suffering most and who are least responsible. It's also about delivering a wave of empowerment in one of the most profound attacks on global poverty and inequality to have ever taken place, by opening up opportunities for billions of people. Paris gives us a foundation for which we can build a movement for climate justice, and we need to grasp this opportunity. It's a fragile foundation at the moment, and success for climate justice is not automatic or predetermined, so we have a lot of work ahead of us. This work involves finding solutions for development that don't rely on the same dirty energy that built businesses in Europe and North America for over a century, and ensuring that these solutions are equitable. If that happens, people are not just addressing the climate change challenges, but are working to lower poverty and inequality and to promote development for people. They're creating a world that is zero carbon and zero poverty. A core part of climate justice is gender equality and equity. As we know, and as we've heard throughout this morning, women are frequently marginalised in society, and their traditional roles in many societies suffer from the effects of climate change. An example of how climate change is impacting women can be seen in the reduction in secure, clean water supplies caused by climate change impacts. The burden of water collection is in many regions placed on women and girls. In countries such as Zambia, Malawi, and Ethiopia, collecting water takes longer than 30 minutes for more than a quarter of the population. A recent study in Tanzania showed that a 12% increase in school attendance when water was available within 15 minutes, compared to more than half an hour away. So it makes a huge difference to the increase in school attendance. An increase in education opportunities ensures greater economic activity, a pathway to development, and can create a virtuous cycle. It also has a significant impact on future generations. Educated women are less likely to die in childbirth. Mother's education improves childhood nutrition. Educated women have children later in life. Less of them are likely to get married at a young age. and they have better employment opportunities. So we can see how relatively simple changes can ensure gender-responsive development that create significant changes to the sustainability and long-term prospects of sustainable development. It's these sorts of insights that come best from the people on the ground whom they affect most. My foundation is putting a lot of emphasis on involving grassroots women in the processes now leading to the conference in the ongoing COPs, the next one being in Morocco. We believe that the voices and experience and knowledge and wisdom of grassroots women and communities has to be encouraged. And encouraging greater grassroots participation should go hand in hand with efforts to ensure that development is not just targeted on the needs of the here and now, but also ensures that the planetary boundaries are respected and that future generations inherit a planet on which they can pursue their own development and have the same human rights as we enjoy now. So the change we need is not only in the goals we set ourselves, but also in ensuring that those goals are inclusive of the needs of women and the vulnerable, inclusive in relation to the value they put on participation and grassroots knowledge, and inclusive of planetary boundaries and of generations that are not yet born. I'm going to conclude with a phrase, an expression from a good friend and indeed mentor of mine, Wangari Maathai, who unfortunately died too young. I learned a great deal from her, and I believe that she has captured the essence of where we are at the moment. We're in 2016, after the Sustainable Development Goals and Paris Agreement of 2015 and the Financing for Development and indeed the Sendai Treaty in Japan earlier in the year. We have a whole array of potential goals to implement, but we need much more real delivery, real commitment, measuring that delivery, making sure that we are on course. And so what Wangari Maathai said, I think, sums this up very well. She said, "In the course of history, there comes a time when humanity is called upon to shift to a new level of consciousness, to reach a higher moral ground." I believe that time is now. Thank you very much.